The bright lights of the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio were as dazzling as ever. It was a regular late-night show, and the audience was buzzing with excitement. People were laughing, clapping, and holding their phones ready to catch a glimpse of one of the most famous men in the world, Musk. Elon walked onto the stage with a confident smile, wearing a dark blazer and a crisp white shirt. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Jimmy, full of charm and humor, welcomed him warmly and made a joke about flying cars. Elon laughed awkwardly, as he always did on television. For the first few minutes, everything went as expected. They talked about electric cars, Mars colonization, and Elon's bold plans for the future. The audience was fully engaged. Jimmy threw in some sarcastic remarks about social media, and Elon responded with a smirk. Then, right as the show was getting into its rhythm, something strange happened. From the middle of the crowd, a young woman stood up suddenly. She had short black hair, a sharp face, and eyes filled with fire. She was holding a old worn photo of a destroyed village. Her voice was loud, shaking with emotion. "Ask him about Project Azimuth," she shouted. The studio froze. The camera kept rolling. Jimmy looked stunned. Elon's face went pale. For a moment, nobody moved. The woman held the photo higher. It showed a burned-down building, a collapsed roof, and children covered in dust. "Ask him about the satellites." She screamed again. "Ask him how they were used." Security guards rushed toward her. The audience gasped. Some people screamed. Others pulled out their phones and started filming. Within seconds, she was pulled away by 2 guards and taken off stage. But the damage was done. The internet exploded. Clips of the woman yelling spread across social media like wildfire. People all over the world were asking the same question. Who was she? What was Project Azimuth? What did Elon Musk know? Back on the stage, Elon was trying to remain calm. He adjusted his blazer and forced a smile. Jimmy, trying to bring the energy back, made a nervous joke. But the audience wasn't laughing anymore. The air had changed. There was tension now. Something felt wrong. "Do you know what she was talking about?" Jimmy asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Elon hesitated, just for a second. He looked into the camera and said, "I don't know anything about that." But his eyes told a different story. That short moment, his silence, his pause, the flicker of recognition in his eyes was enough for millions of viewers to notice. By the time the show ended, hashtags like #ProjectAzimuth and #ELON exposed were trending worldwide. Within an hour, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube were filled with slow-motion clips of the protester. People zoomed in on the photo she held. Journalists were already digging into the name Project Azimuth. Who was this woman? Was it a publicity stunt? Or had something truly dark just been revealed? Some claimed it was fake. Others believed it was real. Conspiracy theorists went wild. Political analysts began speculating. News anchors from CNN to Al Jazeera ran headlines. "Protester disrupts Musk interview. What is Project Azimuth?" The studio released a short statement calling the protest an unexpected security breach. Elon's team posted a message denying any knowledge of the protest or any project called Azimuth. They labeled the incident as a hoax and refused to comment further, but the public wasn't satisfied. Someone leaked the protester's name online. Layla Haddad. She was 25 years old, a Yemeni activist, a former medical student. She had lived through a war, escaped her country, and had been raising her voice against the use of tech in modern warfare. Her name started appearing everywhere that night. Newsrooms stayed open late. Reporters called their sources. Experts in defense and satellite communication were asked about Project Azimuth. Theories grew. Some said Azimuth was a secret military program. Others believed it was a satellite mapping system used for more than just navigation. A few claimed it was connected to drone strikes in the Middle East. The most chilling theory? Elon Musk's satellite company had unknowingly or maybe knowingly provided data to military forces, which used it to target areas in Yemen. Villages, hospitals, schools. No one had answers. But the questions had already shaken the world in. Just a few minutes of live television, a quiet truth hidden in the shadows had begun to break through the surface. A billionaire who was always in control had lost his calm for a moment. A woman with nothing left to lose had spoken. Upon the world had listened, and somewhere far away from the cameras, Layla Haddad was on the run. But she wasn't running. She was just getting started. Layla had disappeared as quickly as she had appeared. One moment she was being dragged off the studio floor, and the next she had vanished into the city's shadows. But her name was everywhere now. In London, inside a small, dimly lit apartment, Layla sat by a window, watching the street below. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. She had expected this. She had planned every second of her interruption. On national television. The moment she shouted Project Azimuth, she knew she had crossed a line and there was no going back. Her phone buzzed with encrypted messages from allies across the world. You made the news in Turkey. BBC. Just played the clip again. They're asking about Azimuth. But what none of them knew was that Layla hadn't acted alone. She was part of a quiet, secret network of whistleblowers, journalists, and survivors. They called themselves the Fifth Signaler Group, determined to reveal the truth about how technology had been used as a weapon in the name of progress. Layla's story began in Aden, Yemen, when she was only 16. Her family lived in a small town just outside the city. Her father was a teacher, her mother a nurse. They had no ties to politics, no weapons, no secrets. But one night, everything changed. A loud hum echoed through the sky. Then a blast. Dust, fire, screams. She woke up under rubble. Her parents were gone. Later, a neighbor told her the strike was meant for a terrorist cell nearby. But there were no terrorists, just children and books and beds. She remembered the strange object that remained on a nearby rooftop. A small white satellite dish, with a blue logo and serial numbers scratched off. Years later, as she grew older and read more, she recognized that dish in photos online. It was part of Starlink, Elon Musk's global internet system. That's when the questions started. Why? Was a commercial satellite dish in a remote war zone? Who gave permission for its use? And why did people keep dying around these devices? Back in the present, in a dark news office in Madrid, investigative journalist Nico Reyes was staring at a USB drive that had been mailed to him with no return address. It was labeled in black ink, Azimuth. They're lying. He plugged it into a secure system. The files were massive. Most were encrypted. But one folder opened easily. Inside were internal emails, technical diagrams, and one file that made him sit up straight, an invoice from a company called Starlink LLC to a government contractor known only as Novidine Global. Purpose: satellite data leasing for precision surveillance. Location redacted. Date: 1 week before the airstrike in Aden. Nico leaned back in his chair, stunned. He had spent years chasing stories about the dark intersection of private tech and military power. But this was the first real proof. If Elon Musk's satellite company had leased data to foreign military groups, it could be one of the biggest scandals in modern history. He picked up his phone and called his editor. "We have something." The editor sighed. "Another theory?" "No, not a theory. Hard evidence." Back in London, Layla received a new message through an anonymous app. "You've been seen. They're looking for you." She didn't flinch. Instead, she typed a short message to Nico. "I have more, but I need your help. I can prove it's real." Meanwhile, Elon Musk was in crisis mode. His public relations team flooded the internet with articles calling Layla a disturbed activist, a conspiracy theorist, and a paid actress. They released statements saying Starlink was strictly for civilian use, never for military purposes. But the internet was no longer listening to PR teams. People were asking hard questions. Online forums began collecting satellite data and warzone images. Independent researchers posted evidence of Starlink dishes in war-hit areas in Libya, Sudan, and Yemen. Journalists from major networks started digging. And all the while, the mystery of Project Azimuth grew. What was it? Why was it hidden? And why did Elon Musk seem to recognize the name, even as he denied it? In the Pentagon, behind closed doors, a special meeting was held. A defense official showed a photo of Layla Haddad on the screen and said, "She knows." And someone gave her the documents, another officer whispered. "If this goes public, we'll lose control of the narrative." One general leaned forward. "Then we make sure it doesn't." But it was already too late. The truth was moving, through back channels, across borders, on thumb drives, on live television, face, now young, angry, and unafraid. Her name was Layla Haddad. And she was not done speaking. In the quiet of his office in Madrid, journalist Nico Reyes stared at the flashing code on his screen. His team worked in silence around him. The air was tense. Files from the USB drive labeled Azimuth were slowly unlocking line by line. Email by email. Nico was a veteran of many exposes: corrupt ministers, rigged elections, hidden wars. But this wasn't about one country or one crime. This was about a global system built on quiet deals between tech giants and governments hiding behind innovation wrapped in the language of progress. He opened another folder. It contained logs, timestamped satellite data showing the movement of drones over villages in the Middle East. The IP logs showed something strange. Some of the control signals didn't come from military bases, but from private corporate buildings in California, Virginia, and even Texas. Companies with clean websites and vague missions, like global connectivity and freedom through data, were linked to live drone coordination networks. One name kept showing up in the communication logs: Azimuth Node-7, double quotes Node-7, Nico said aloud. "That's not just a name. That's a command terminal." One of his researchers, Elena, leaned over. "That's the same one that was traced to a Tesla building last year. Remember the leak?" Nico nodded. Everyone thought it was just satellite calibration software, but it wasn't, was it? He clicked into another file, a blurry screenshot of an internal Starlink communication between two engineers. Node 7 requests verified. Unlock sequence confirmed. Delay broadcast logs for 12 minutes, client classified. Understood. Weaponized overlay active until midnight UTC. The implications were clear. Someone had modified Starlink systems to delay or manipulate tracking data. Someone had ordered it. That kind of access couldn't have happened without permission from the very top. "Elon," Elena whispered. "I don't want to believe it," Nico said, "but this is his system." Meanwhile, far away in a hidden apartment in Istanbul, Layla Haddad sat with an old laptop. Her face was bruised, her lips split, but her spirit was unbroken. She had barely escaped London. The men who stormed her safe house weren't police. They didn't ask questions. They just came to silence her. A Turkish journalist named Melis had hidden her. Melis was young, bold, and already under watch for her reports on war crimes in Syria. She handed Layla tea and asked gently, "Why Elon Musk?" Layla took a breath. "Because people trust him. They think he's different, smarter, outside the system. But that's what made him dangerous." No one questioned him. She tapped her laptop. "There's a contract between Starlink and a defense contractor called Novadine Global. It was signed the year my village was bombed. It's all here." They used Elon's satellites to stream high-resolution, targeting Day Wonder, the name Project Azimuth. Melis blinked. "You can prove it." Layla nodded. "It's not just proof. It's the blueprint of a lie." At that very moment, Nico's phone lit up. A private, encrypted message from Layla. I'm alive. Have more files. Let's talk. Urgent, he responded instantly. Video call? 10 minutes. Secure line. When the call connected, Layla's face appeared, but determined. I know what you have, Nico, she said. But it's not the full picture. She uploaded 3 new files. One was a voice memo, a leaked recording of a private meeting between Elon Musk and a U.S. intelligence official. Official, we appreciate the access. Without Starlink, our vision for forward surveillance wouldn't exist, Elon. Just make sure they don't trace it back to me. Nico's heart pounded. You just gave me a war crime, he whispered. Layla didn't smile. They bombed hospitals, schools, weddings, and then they blamed the fog of war. But now, the fog is gone. Back in the U.S., Elon Musk was in a closed-door meeting with his legal team. His public image was crumbling. News outlets across the world were reporting on Layla's claims. Stock in Tesla and SpaceX was falling. Starlink executives were panicking. Elon, one advisor said, we need to make a public statement, deny the program. But Elon stared out the window. They'll find the rest, he muttered. They always do. Behind him, on a large screen, a breaking news alert flashed. UN demands full investigation into civilian satellite use in war zones. A storm was building. Governments, human rights groups, and journalists were closing in. What had started as a protest on a comedy show was now turning into an international scandal, and somewhere deep in a digital bunker. A hacker group known only as Ashes of Truth posted a message on the dark web. Azimuth was only the beginning. Watch the skies. The silence was over. The truth was awake. The world was watching now. News channels around the globe were showing split screens. On one side, Elon Musk's companies under intense scrutiny. On the other, images of war-torn villages from Yemen, Libya, and Sudan. Each had one thing in common: a small white Starlink dish lying in the rubble. In London, New York, Doha, and Berlin, reporters were running breaking news alerts. Civil rights lawyers, UN spokespeople, and tech experts were debating live on air. The story had grown beyond Elon Musk. It had become a symbol of how far technology had slipped into the hands of power and how quiet the world had been while it happened. But the biggest moment was still to come. An international news platform, Global World Report, ABV's C-style outlet known for its fearless reporting, announced a special live interview with Layla Haddad. The teaser clip showed her sitting in front of a plain gray wall, eyes locked on the camera. The world stopped to listen. As the feed went live, people gathered in homes, offices, cafes. The view count hit 10 million in under a minute. The anchor spoke first. Tonight, we speak with Layla Haddad, the protester who interrupted Elon Musk's interview and who now claims to have evidence linking his satellite network to attacks on civilians. Layla, thank you for joining us. Layla nodded. Thank you for giving me space to speak. Her voice was steady. Behind her calm was a storm of loss, grief, and truth. The anchor asked carefully, you say Elon Musk's satellite company was involved in war crimes? That's a very serious claim. What proof do you have? Layla didn't blink. She opened her laptop and shared her screen live. This is a contract signed between Starlink LLC and Novodyne Global, a defense contractor, connected to U.S. intelligence, she said. It shows dates, signatures, and transaction amounts. The contract allowed real-time precision imaging in designated conflict zones. She clicked again. This is a drone map. The red zone is my village in Yemen. The green path is the flight of the drone that hit us. The system used for targeting uploaded live feeds through a Starlink terminal disguised as a disaster response unit. The anchor's eyes widened. These are not theories, Layla said. They are documents. And I'm not the only one. Who has them? She paused and looked into the camera. I want to ask Elon Musk directly. Did you know how your technology was being used? Did you care? Back in California, Elon Musk sat in a private room with his PR team. The live interview played on screen. His face was tight, his jaw clenched. His phone buzzed nonstop with messages from board members, senators, CEOs. He stood. Suddenly, "She's good," he said quietly. "Very good." His head of communications whispered, "You want us to strike back?" Elon hesitated, then said, "Let it breathe. Let the fire get bigger." Back on Global World Report, the anchor asked Layla, "Are you afraid for your life?" "I already lost everything," she said. "My family, my country. But I won't lose the truth." Just then, a new alert flashed across the screen. Breaking: UK Parliament calls emergency session to discuss civilian use of satellite tech. Layla looked at the anchor. "This is bigger than me," says about every person who died in silence while billionaires made money from war. Protests broke out around the world within hours. Outside SpaceX headquarters, people gathered with candles and signs reading, "You sowed the sky and blood on the signal." In London, thousands marched past Parliament demanding justice. In Yemen, crowds stood around burned buildings, holding up pictures of the fallen with Starlink dishes beside them. Governments couldn't stay silent anymore. The United Nations Human Rights Council scheduled a special inquiry into the militarization of commercial technology. International watchdogs began preparing case files for possible criminal negligence or complicity in war crimes. Inside the White House, national security advisors were in chaos. The president asked a sharp question. "If this goes to trial, who else is exposed?" One advisor replied, "Sir, if Layla's right, there are multiple tech companies involved, not just Musk. Then we've got a bigger problem than one protester." That night, just hours after the interview, Layla's location in Istanbul was compromised. Melis, the Turkish journalist protecting her, saw headlights outside the safe house. Armed men stepped out of two dark vans. There were no markings, no uniforms. "Layla," she whispered. Run Layla grabbed her bag already packed. She didn't panic. She had expected this. She climbed out through the back window, ran through alleyways, disappeared into the streets. By morning, news outlets reported Layla had died missing after powerful interview. Some claimed she'd been arrested. Others believed she'd been silenced. But Nico Reyes knew better. He received a voice message that night through an encrypted line. Layla's voice, clear but urgent. "I'm not gone. I'm just one step ahead. The next file is ready. Tell the world. The truth doesn't vanish." And with that, the real game began. 5 years earlier, in a private meeting room inside a sleek SpaceX facility in Hawthorne, California, Elon Musk sat across from 3 men in dark suits. They weren't investors or engineers. They were officials, quiet, sharp, used to making things disappear rather than build them. They slid a folder across the table. "It's called Project Azimuth," one said. "A partnership, light access, minimal involvement on your end. Think of it as a beta program, something to test precision. Mapping for natural disasters." Elon flipped through the documents. At first glance, it looked harmless. A tech-sharing agreement, limited rights, civilian coordination. But tucked between the lines were details that told a different story. Vague clauses, like unconventional environments, classified recipients, and target support layers. "I'm not interested in military stuff," Elon had said, glancing up. One of the men smiled politely. "Neither are we. We're interested in peaceful control, stability, and your technology makes that easier." That meeting ended with a handshake and a quiet agreement to look the other way. Now, in the present day, that old handshake was burning the world down. Nico Reyes stood inside a glass-walled newsroom in Madrid, staring at a new document just decrypted by his team. It was the full, unedited contract between Starlink and Novodyne Global. What had started as limited data access had evolved, year by year, into full live streaming permissions, AI-based drone coordination, and masking of geolocation pings. The Final clause read, in exchange for technical services, the recipient is authorized to manage media narratives as needed under U.S. National Secrecy Protocol 331A. Nico whispered, they didn't just sell technology, they sold the silence too. One of his junior researchers rushed in. You need to see this? The Turkish police have closed the file on Layla's disappearance. No charges, no search, which means they were told to back off. Nico said grimly. He looked at the encrypted server again. A new upload was coming in from Layla. It was a 42-page PowerPoint deck marked Internal Level 5 Eyes Only. The title, Azimuth, Civilian Integration as Military Leverage. Inside were slides detailing how civilian satellite terminals were placed in war zones under the cover of education and telemedicine. They were placed in schools, hospitals, and refugee camps. But during red periods, the terminals would automatically shift to military frequency modes, feeding live data to allied drones, and in some cases, guiding their strikes. Every time a dish was activated, a timestamp was logged on both sides, one at Starlink's headquarters and one at a U.S. Air Force data center. Layla's message came with the files. I watched children die under buildings these terminals helped destroy. If Starlink didn't know, they were blind. If they did, they're guilty. That night, mass protests broke out across Europe and the Middle East. Outside U.S. embassies, demonstrators chanted justice for Layla and end tech wars. In San Francisco, hundreds of former Tesla employees held a silent vigil. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, a draft resolution was circulated, calling for a full international criminal court. Inquiry into the involvement of commercial satellite systems in unlawful military actions. In Washington, the president was briefed in the Situation Room. This isn't just about Musk anymore. The CIA director said Novadine is connected to 5 other tech firms. We've got supply chain fingerprints from Amazon Defense, CloudCore, AI, and even Meta. So what do? The president asked. We get ahead of it fast, or the public will believe we're all guilty. Behind the scenes, high-level diplomats began preparing Elon Musk's team for a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing. Subpoenas were already issued. Elon's lawyers told him to cooperate. Elon refused. I won't be the scapegoat, he said. Everyone was in on this. They came to me. But his empire was crumbling. Tesla shares dropped 12%. SpaceX lost a major EU contract. Advertisers began pulling from X, formerly Twitter. Powerful CEOs who once called him a visionary now avoided his name in public. That same night, Nico received a final encrypted message from Layla. Just one line. They think removing me will stop the truth. But I was never the only one. Attached was a list minus 17 names. Whistleblowers, former contractors, engineers, data analysts. People across the world who had worked on parts of Project Azimuth without ever realizing what they were part of. And now they were speaking up. In Istanbul, hidden behind a black scarf and walking through a crowd of tourists, Layla boarded a boat headed across the Bosporus, heading toward a contact who promised protection and a voice at the United Nations as the city faded behind her. She looked down at a battered satellite dish she had carried with her, not to use, but to show to remind the world silence was not innocence. And the sky was never neutral. The U.S. Senate building was surrounded by news vans, security barriers, and angry protesters holding signs that read, Elon lead. People died inside. The air was heavy with tension. The hearing was about to begin. Billionaire Elon Musk had been subpoenaed to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Following the explosive evidence leaked by Layla Haddad and journalist Nico Reyes, Senator Margaret Hall, chairwoman of the committee, adjusted her glasses and looked down at the long list of questions before her. Cameras were rolling. The hearing was being broadcast live on every major network. CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC. The world was watching. Elon Musk, do you swear to tell the truth? She asked firmly. Elon, dressed in a dark suit with no tie, nodded. I do, Senator Hall. Leaned in. Let's begin with a simple question. What is Project Azimuth? Elon paused. Project Azimuth. It's not something I ever approved, created, or ran. If it existed within any of my companies, it was without my knowledge. Whispers moved through the chamber. Senator Hall raised a photo of a contract. This document shows Starlink leasing high-resolution surveillance access to Novadine Global, a known U.S. defense contractor. Your signature is on the final approval page. Would you like to explain that? Elon stared at the photo for a moment, then replied, I sign hundreds of documents a month. This one may have passed through legal without raising red flags. I don't recall the specific deal. Behind her, Senator James Calder stood up. Mr. Musk, we have voice recordings, you saying, and I quote, just make sure they don't trace it back to me. That was you, wasn't it? Elon looked directly at the senator. That quote has no context. I don't recall the conversation, and if it did happen, it was probably related to internal company data security, not war. The room grew louder. Reporters typed furiously. On live TV, analysts whispered, he's cornered. Then Senator Hall played a clip on the screen behind her. It was drone footage from a school in Yemen, timestamped and labeled Starlink Node 7 live feed. The video clearly showed a satellite terminal transmitting as a drone circled overhead. This was a school, she said. 5 children died. This signal came from your system. Are you telling us you had no idea? Elon clenched his jaw. No. I'm telling you this system was designed to connect the world, not destroy it. If my technology was used for violence, then that's on whoever twisted it, not the builder. Not the builder. Senator Hall repeated coldly. You built the sky and then sold the stars. Across the world, people watched in silence. Layla Haddad, still in hiding, streamed the hearing on a cracked phone screen. She sat in a refugee shelter on the outskirts of Geneva. Finally, safe for now, a human rights group had smuggled her out of Turkey. An older woman beside her asked in Arabic, Is that him? Layla nodded. Yes, that's the man they trust. That's the man they don't question. Back in the hearing, Elon's lawyers passed him notes. He ignored them. Senator Calder spoke again. Something else. Mr. Musk, a former SpaceX engineer has come forward. He claims you personally signed off on a system update that allowed military frequencies to override civilian satellite controls. Elon's face darkened. I need to see that statement. You will, Calder said. But right now, the world needs to see yours. At that moment, something unexpected happened. On screens around the world, a live stream suddenly appeared. A message flashed. Azimuth Truth Drop Number 1. The sky was never free. The video showed maps, documents, and internal emails. Then came a video message from Layla herself. She sat in front of the UN building, face uncovered, voice calm. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. They tried to erase me. But the truth was never mine alone. Today, I release every file I have. Project Azimuth is real, and it cost lives. The drop hit like a thunderclap. Social media platforms lit up. Thousands of files became public. Engineers, pilots, and even 2 former Pentagon contractors were named. The entire network from signal to strike was exposed. In the Senate chamber, phones buzzed. Screens updated in real time. Senator Hall looked back at Elon. It's over. The world knows. Elon sat quietly now. The camera zoomed in on his face. The face of a man once praised as a genius, now trapped in a truth too heavy to spin. Later that night, international protests turned into movements. Young people in Nairobi, Karachi, and Paris marched under a single banner. Turn off the war signal. Governments began freezing defense contracts tied to tech firms. Shareholders pulled money. Elon Musk stepped down from the board of Starlink, claiming he needed to focus on innovation and healing. But for many, it was too late. The truth had arrived, unfiltered, unstoppable, and soon justice would follow. The world was no longer silent. Then 24 hours of the Azimuth files going public. 5 governments announced formal investigations into their defense departments. 3 CEOs of major tech firms stepped down. Starlink's global operations were suspended in over a dozen countries. And Elon Musk, the once untouchable titan of innovation, was now under international scrutiny. Its reputation cracked beyond repair. But for Layla Haddad, the storm was just beginning. In Geneva, she stood before the United Nations Human Rights Council, invited as a civilian witness. The hall was full. Diplomats, activists, journalists, all present to hear from the woman, whose voice had shaken the foundations of tech empires and state power. She wore a plain black suit, no makeup, no shield. Just truth. "I'm not a lawyer," she began, "not a politician, just someone who lost everything and decided silence wasn't an option anymore." Behind her, a screen lit up with images from the Azimuth leak, drone strike paths, civilian buildings destroyed, metadata trails linking satellite terminals to active war zones. "I speak for the children who were called collateral," she continued. 4. The schools that became targets. For the promises made in glossy tech brochures that ended in fire and rubble, some diplomats shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded, quietly moved. Layla's voice never broke. "I was told a satellite couldn't kill, that it was just hardware, that those in charge didn't know. But now we all know. And knowing means choosing." Applause broke out, not loud, but real. The council voted unanimously to form a special commission on civilian technology and war crimes, the first of its kind. The recommendation was clear. Any private tech company found complicit in targeted civilian deaths could face prosecution. At the International Criminal Court in Washington, panic spread through defense and tech sectors. Congressional hearings multiplied. Intelligence contracts were quietly rewritten or canceled. Investors fled from any company mentioned in the Azimuth files. At Tesla, employees demanded transparency. At SpaceX, engineers refused to work on government-linked modules. Elon Musk's own staff, once fiercely loyal, now whispered about betrayal. Under growing legal pressure, Elon finally spoke publicly. In a live press conference, he stood before the world, tired, pale. No longer the bold showman of TED Talks and rocket launches. "I never meant for my work to be used for harm," he said, "but I accept that it was. I accept that I failed to control it. It wasn't an apology. It was a surrender." Moments after his statement, the International Criminal Court confirmed that Elon Musk would be one of the individuals named in its preliminary investigation, not for ordering strikes, but for enabling the infrastructure behind them and failing. To intervene when warned, for millions watching, it was a moment of reckoning. Nico Reyes released his final report titled Azimuth, When Innovation Becomes a Weapon. It was a 400-page timeline of corruption, silence, and complicity. His last line struck a nerve across every newsroom and boardroom. The problem was never the sky, it was who got to control it, and who they were willing to let die beneath it. Weeks later, Layla visited a refugee camp in southern Yemen. Children gathered around her. Some recognized her from television. She smiled at them, not with pride, but with quiet purpose. She brought with her 2 items, a battered Starlink terminal, now disconnected, and a stack of small solar radios. "For listening," she said, handing one to a boy. "So you'll always hear the world, and maybe one day the world will hear you." As she walked through the camp, a small girl tugged at her sleeve. "Are you the woman who stopped the sky from hurting us?" Layla knelt beside her. "No," she said softly. "I'm just the one who told the sky to answer for what it did." In orbit, thousands of satellites still circled the Earth, silent, glowing, watching. But now the world was watching back. Laws were changing, borders were tightening. Whistleblowers were rising. The age of unchecked power was ending. The age of truth, accountability, and resistance had finally begun.